So the difference between hoarding and collecting, first of all, the definition of hoarding is acquiring so many objects that it renders your home or parts of your home unusable. You can't use your kitchen, you can't use your bathroom. It interferes with your life, it creates emotional stress. That's really the definition of hoarding. Collecting is different because with collecting, it doesn't cause emotional stress. With collecting, you acquire one kind of object and you're proud of those objects. You display them, you might go to shows about them. So it's really the opposite. The reason that some people become hoarders is, it's complicated, but it's actually a brain problem. It's visible in the brains of hoarders. You can see that they have a slower metabolic rate in the areas of the brain that relate to memory, spatial orientation, and emotions. That's not to say that everyone that has that becomes a hoarder, but there is a very, very strong genetic predisposition. In fact, 85% of hoarders can point to a first-degree family member who was what they would call a pack rat. It usually is set off by some kind of trauma. Someone, in the case of my mother, her long-term boyfriend died. And before that, while she had always been very unorganized and very lackadaisical about cleaning, it wasn't until her long-term boyfriend died that the hoarding really got out of control. And that's when it became pathological. That's when it started affecting her life, my life, everyone's life. So I came to write this book. I started sort of thinking about it in the back of my mind at least about 6 or 7 years ago when I told my husband an anecdote about the way when I was a kid I would sit in my elementary school and I would look out the window. In one direction I could see my mother's house and in the other direction I could see my dad and my stepmom's house. And I had just very different visceral reactions to each of the houses. So it was just a little anecdote I told him, and right away he said, "You know you have to write about this, right?" And I just couldn't imagine ever writing about this because I'd never even told anyone besides him about my mother's hoarding. A few years later, I started kind of being more open to the topic when I joined a support group for children of hoarders. And I started realizing just how big of a secret it is for all of us. How much shame, unwarranted shame, we all carried around. Those two things just sort of dovetailed, where I decided I should actually consider writing about this, and so that's when I began the proposal. I was not concerned about how my mother would react to the book, only because I asked her if she would mind if I wrote about hoarding, and she said, no, not at all, that would be a good thing. You know, she thought maybe her experience would help people understand it better. So, and then also I showed it to her. I showed her part of it as I was writing it, and then I showed her the whole thing when I was done, and she completely approves of it and is actually really happy with it.